It was a bitterly cold winter morning in a remote rural town, the kind of cold that freezes breath mid-air and coats every surface in a thick crust of frost. John Whitaker, a 53-year-old widower and retired mechanic, was driving along the snow-covered back roads near the outskirts of town when he noticed something odd by the ditch, a small, trembling shape nestled against the frozen earth. At first, he thought it might be a discarded jacket or trash, but as he slowed down and got closer, he saw the tiny body of a puppy, shivering violently and barely able to lift its head. Without a second thought, John pulled over, wrapped the fragile pup in his thick coat, and rushed back to his truck. The puppy's eyes were barely open, its body stiff from the cold. John turned the heat on full blast and cradled the pup against his chest as he drove straight home. Once inside, he gently laid the pup in a basket lined with blankets and placed it next to a heater. As he nursed it with warm milk and gently massaged its limbs, the dog began to whimper faintly. John named him Frosty, promising he'd never know the cruelty of the cold again. Later that day, John returned to the ditch with supplies in case there were more animals in need. As he examined the area more closely, he noticed a slight depression in the snow beneath where Frosty had been. Curiosity turned to alarm when he began digging and realized the snow had concealed something shocking, a cardboard box buried shallowly, inside of which lay 2 more lifeless puppies, frozen beyond saving. But what chilled John even more was a soaked, half-torn note taped to the lid. "Please help them. I can't keep them. I'm sorry." Tears welled in John's eyes. Someone had abandoned them, perhaps hoping a kind stranger would find them before the cold claimed their lives. Only Frosty had survived, barely. John took the note and the box home, burying the 2 puppies in his backyard with care and placing a small wooden cross over the grave. From that day on, John poured all his love and energy into Frosty. The little puppy began to thrive under his care. His fur grew soft and thick, his bark strong, and his spirit full of life. The bond they formed became inseparable. Frosty followed John everywhere, on walks in the garden, even sitting beside him while he tinkered with old engines in the garage. Word of John's rescue spread through the town, and soon, local school children began leaving dog food and blankets at his porch. A nearby shelter offered medical care for Frosty free of charge. Frosty became a local hero, not just because he survived, but because he brought life back to a man who had been quietly grieving for years. What had begun as a tragic discovery in a snowy ditch became a powerful story of second chances, of how one man's act of kindness changed not just a puppy's life, but healed a heart long burdened with loss. As the winter days slowly gave way to spring, Frosty transformed from a fragile, shivering pup into a lively, loyal companion. But what surprised everyone most wasn't just the dog's recovery. It was the visible change in John. Once known around town as the quiet man, who kept mostly to himself since losing his wife 5 years ago, John now greeted neighbors with a warm smile and often stopped to chat while walking Frosty. The dog had not only brought warmth to his home, but reopened his heart to the world. Children who once ran past John's house now stopped by daily to play with Frosty. He had a gentle soul that mirrored John's own pain and healing. People began to notice that John had started building something in his backyard. Not just a large wooden doghouse for Frosty, but a small fenced area with heated shelters. When asked about it, John simply said, "No creature should ever be left out in the cold." With the help of neighbors and a local carpenter, John's backyard soon became a mini sanctuary. He called it Frosty's Haven. It started with just a few heated kennels and food bowls, but within weeks, people began bringing stray animals they found or couldn't care for. Local vets volunteered their time. Donations began arriving from nearby towns, all inspired by the viral story of the freezing puppy and the grieving man who saved him. But perhaps the most emotional moment came one rainy afternoon when a young woman knocked on John's door, her hands trembling as she held an old photo of 3 puppies in her hand. "I left them there," she whispered through tears. "I was living in my car, scared and broke. I thought someone would find them before the snow fell. I'm so sorry." John didn't yell. He didn't close the door. He simply stepped aside and let her in. They sat at the kitchen table, with Frosty curled at their feet, as she explained everything. The eviction, the depression, the guilt. John listened, then said softly, "We all make choices we regret. But you came back. That matters." She began volunteering at Frosty's Haven every day, cleaning kennels and helping care for the animals. Eventually, she found a job and a place to live, thanks to a community inspired by one freezing puppy and one man's unwavering compassion. Frosty's Haven grew from a backyard shelter into a community project, a place of healing, forgiveness, and redemption. And every year, on the anniversary of Frosty's rescue, John hosts a memorial for the 2 puppies who didn't survive, reminding everyone that every act of kindness can become a ripple that changes lives. As word of Frosty's Haven spread across the state, the story caught the attention of a local news crew. They visited John's home, capturing the rows of cozy kennels, the warm smiles of volunteers, and the gentle way John moved among the animals like a father caring for his children. When the segment aired, something unexpected happened. Letters began pouring in. Dozens, then hundreds. People shared their own stories of heartbreak, resilience, and the dogs that had saved them. Some sent donations, others drove for hours just to visit the sanctuary and hug John. But one letter stood out. It was from a man named David, a war veteran living in a distant rural town. His handwriting was shaky, but his words were filled with raw honesty. "I haven't spoken to anyone in months. I saw your story. I lost my dog last winter, and I've lost myself since. You reminded me that love can still exist in this world." John wrote back immediately, and 2 weeks later, David arrived with an old duffel bag and tear-filled eyes. He didn't say much. He just knelt down beside Frosty and whispered, "Thank you." David never left. He became John's right hand, helping with rescues and repairs, and even organizing group visits for veterans suffering from PTSD. It turned out that Frosty, once abandoned in the snow, had the gift of sensing who needed him most. He would sit quietly beside grieving souls, rest his head on their lap, and stay there until their breathing slowed, until their shaking stopped. Frosty became more than a dog. He became a symbol of comfort, of second chances. One winter evening, exactly 1 year after Frosty was found, the town held a candlelight vigil. Hundreds gathered with their dogs by their side. Snow fell gently, blanketing the world in silence, as John stood on the small wooden stage built by volunteers. His voice cracked as he spoke. Frosty didn't just survive that cold night. He gave us all a reason to feel again. He reminded us that even in the darkest, coldest moments, warmth can still be found. And sometimes, that warmth has 4 legs and a wagging tail. Tears streamed down faces, arms wrapped around loved ones, human and canine, and candles lit the night like stars brought to earth. The little freezing puppy had changed lives, not just through survival, but through the chain reaction of love, compassion, and redemption he inspired. And as Frosty sat beside John, looking out at the sea of lights and hearts he had touched, he wagged his tail, content, whole, and home. As the months passed, John's small sanctuary, Frosty's haven, blossomed into a beacon of hope. Not just for abandoned animals, but for lost souls of every kind. Word of the sanctuary spread far beyond their quiet town. Children came to learn compassion, elderly people came to remember love, and veterans came to heal. The bond between John, Frosty, and David deepened, like a family forged not by blood, but by pain and purpose. One day, while organizing supplies in the barn, David discovered something buried beneath the wooden floorboards. An old, rusted metal box. Inside were faded photographs, handwritten letters, and a journal. The entries told the story of a woman who once lived on this very land during the Great Depression. She had turned her modest home into a makeshift shelter for animals, taking in strays when she herself had little to eat. Her final journal entry read, "Even when the world gives you nothing, give love. It's the only thing that multiplies when you share it." John wept as he read those words aloud to the volunteers. It felt like destiny, as if that long-lost woman's spirit had called to him through time, asking him to carry her legacy forward. Inspired, he decided to expand the sanctuary further. With the help of donations and the community's support, they built a memorial garden beside the barn. Each flower planted there was in memory of a dog who had once suffered, but found peace at Frosty's haven. Then came a letter from a young boy named Ethan. He was only 10 years old and battling leukemia. His only wish was to visit Frosty. "He makes me feel brave," Ethan wrote. When he arrived, weak but smiling, Frosty walked right up to him and gently laid his head on Ethan's knee. The boy whispered, "I love you," and for the first time in weeks, he laughed. That night, Ethan's mother told John that her son had found hope again, for life, for tomorrow. The sanctuary had given more than rescue. It had given meaning. As time passed, Frosty began to grow older. His muzzle turned white, his steps slower, but his spirit remained unshaken. One crisp autumn evening, John sat beside him on the porch. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in golden orange and soft pink. "You saved me," John whispered, stroking his friend's fur. "And you saved so many others." Frosty looked up at him, eyes full of warmth and memory. That night, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if even the universe was paying tribute to a dog that had turned tragedy into a triumph of love.